Hi guys, let's go ahead and start the Chapter 7 notes. Just a quick disclaimer, Jack is particularly rambunctious tonight, so if you hear barking or toes clicking, that's what the sound is. It's just Jack being Jack. The outline, we have 5 sections in this chapter: photosynthetic organisms, the process of photosynthesis, plants convert solar energy, plants fix carbon dioxide, and other types of photosynthesis. We'll probably get through the first and second section in this video, but we'll see. I'm hoping for 1 and 2. Photosynthesis as the key to solving our fuel crisis. Plant scientists are tweaking the basic chemistry of photosynthesis to create commercially important oils and fuels. For example, Carmanilla, I don't know how to say that, is a drought-resistant oilseed crop that scientists are improving the efficiency of photosynthesis using genetic engineering and also improving carbon dioxide absorption to increase the raw materials for oil production. Another kind of fuel that scientists are working on is turpentine, which is a high-energy organic molecule from pine trees that make up turpentine. Turpentine is used as a chemical that cleans up oil-based paint, and scientists are improving that to create aviation biofuels. All right, so plant-based fuels for planes, which I think is pretty cool. So here we go, Section 1, photosynthetic organisms. All life on Earth depends on solar energy. Solar energy is where all plants get their energy, and plants form the base of every food chain, food web, food pyramid, everything. So all energy here on Earth at one point or another came from the sun. If you think about fossil fuels, they were once living things that got their energy from the sun. So if we dig up fossil fuels, they were once things that were alive, and so that energy came from the sun. Photosynthetic organisms are algae, plants, and cyanobacteria. They take solar energy and transform it into chemical energy in the form of carbohydrates. These organisms are called autotrophs because they generate their own food. They generate their own food through the process of photosynthesis, which is a process that captures solar energy and transforms it into chemical energy that ends up being stored as a carbohydrate. Photosynthesizers produce food energy that feed themselves as well as heterotrophs. Heterotrophs are consumers. So basically anything that eats something for its energy is a heterotroph. Both autotrophs and heterotrophs use organic molecules produced by photosynthesis as a source of chemical energy for cellular work. So basically all of the energy in my body, every bit of energy that I ever have or will ever have, comes from plants. Photosynthetic organisms. Photosynthesis takes place in the green portions of plants. The leaf of the flowering plant contains mesophyll tissue, and cells containing chloroplast are specialized to carry out photosynthesis. If you look at a tree, I have a lovely oak in my front yard that I can see from here. The leaves, the green portions of the tree, there are none right now since all of the leaves have fallen, but in the summertime when there are green leaves, that is where photosynthesis happens. The brown parts, the wood, the bark, and the roots, they do not do photosynthesis. Okay, they are transport systems for getting water from the roots up to the leaves so that they can use it in photosynthesis, and taking the substances that they make and storing them in the roots. The raw materials for photosynthesis are carbon dioxide and water. If you don't have those two things, you're not going to have photosynthesis happen. You also need sunlight, but we're going to talk more about that later. Roots absorb water that moves up vascular tissue, so the stem of the tree Carbon dioxide enters a leaf through a small opening called stomata and diffuses into chloroplasts in mesophyll cells. The thylakoid membranes of chloroplasts contain chlorophyll and other pigments that can absorb the solar energy that drives photosynthesis. Electrons are energized in the process. Then carbon dioxide is reduced to form a carbohydrate. In the stroma, CO2, carbon dioxide, combines with H2O or water to form C6H12O6, which is glucose. Now, I know that seems like a whole lot of information on this slide, and you're like, Varys, I don't know what a stomata is, and this mesophyll stuff, what does that look like? Well, there's a slide coming up that's going to show that. Here is an example of some photosynthetic organisms. We've got some, that looks like a microscopic type organism, I'm not quite sure. Here we've got some kelp, I believe. And here it looks like this is a giant sequoia or a redwood. Those are photosynthetic organisms. They are plants. Here is the diagram that I was talking about. Here we have a leaf cross section. This bit right here, that's the top of the leaf. That's the waxy cuticle that helps it keep moisture inside the leaf so that it does not evaporate out of the leaf. Then we have this white layer, which is the upper epidermis. It's like the skin of the cell. Here we have mesophyll. Okay. Here we have a leaf vein where water is brought in and glucose is taken away. Here we have the lower epidermis and a stomata, which is an opening that allows the gases in. Here we have a chloroplast. All right, so we've got an outer membrane and an inner membrane, which, remember, supports the endosymbiotic theory that they were once their own living organism but developed a relationship with a larger cell and developed a symbiotic relationship where they work together to get what they need. So we have a stack of thylakoids here. They're like flattened sacks where the photosynthesis happens, right? And they are arranged, grana, sorry. They are stacked on top of each other. There is thylakoid space here, and then this is the thylakoid membrane. The cytoplasm-like fluid that surrounds them is called the stroma. All right, and this is a view using an electron microscope to show actually what they look like. All right, moving on to section 2, the process of photosynthesis. Light reactions take place only in the presence of light. That kind of makes sense, right? That's one of the few times in science that the name makes sense. These are energy capturing reactions. They capture sun energy. The chlorophyll absorbs solar energy. Remember, chlorophyll is the pigment that absorbs the energy. It is found in the chloroplast. And when that solar energy hits the chlorophyll, it energizes electrons. And those electrons move down an electron transport chain. That electron transport chain pumps hydrogen ions into the thylakoids, into these membrane sacs. And the electron transport chain is used to make ATP out of ADP and to make NADPH out of NADP. Now, we haven't talked about that molecule yet. We're going to get to it. All right, so just sit tight. The other process involved in photosynthesis is called the Calvin cycle, and it takes place in the stroma, or the gel-like stuff outside the thylakoids, outside these stacks of thylakoids called grana. All right, and this is where carbon dioxide is reduced to a carbohydrate. The reactions use ATP and NADPH to produce the carbohydrate. So the Calvin cycle uses the substances made by the light reactions to make carbohydrates. And these reactions were named after a man named Melvin Calvin, who used a carbon isotope to trace carbon in photosynthesis. So he used a special kind of carbon so that he could see how the plant uses it through that process. Photosynthesis involves oxidation and reduction. Oxidation is the loss of, and reduction is the gain of electrons. So remember from last chapter, oil rig. In photosynthesis, carbon dioxide is reduced and water is oxidized. So here we have a man and a plant. He is looking at the plant, showing something to us in the picture. Here we have an aquatic plant, okay, one that lives in water, and it is producing oxygen gas. That's what these bubbles are. And if you put one of these plants in the sun, the number of bubbles increases greatly. I used to have some real plants, some living plants in my fish tank, and it was very interesting to watch as the fish tank was in the sun to see the increasing amounts of bubbles. However, when I had my fish tank at my other school, the plants quickly died because people kept putting things into the fish tank. So here we have an overview of photosynthesis. We have our thylakoids, our thylakoid membranes inside our chloroplast, which is inside our plant cell. All right, so we have solar energy striking those thylakoids. We have some water coming in that is being delivered via the roots. Okay, we've got some ADP, adenosine diphosphate, and some NADP in those thylakoids. The water is broken down and oxygen gas is released, and the hydrogens are used to make NADPH and to make ATP. Remember ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Those then, the ADP, NADPH, and ATP go into the Calvin cycle. All right. The carbon dioxide is used in the Calvin cycle. We're going to go into more detail about that soon.